Okay, guys, we are officially recording. Hello to everyone, wherever you're at, whenever you're viewing this recording. Just wanted to, acknowledge everyone up front, tell everyone hello. Hope you had a great Thanksgiving. You're recovering. Me, I'm still sweating gravy from the turkey and dressing, myself, but I've been in the gym trying to sweat it out. And man, when I think about what we're going to speak on this evening, and I think about, the journey, thus far with Bob, man, I have to, I gotta do a little quick time traveling for you guys, just so how this relationship between me and Bob came to be. I was actually on my way to NoCo a couple years ago, and I got a random Facebook message from a guy that was like, "Hey, man, heard you going to NoCo. Hope to see you out there. Hope to connect." And I'm like, "Who in the hell is this?" Like, I had no idea, who it was, and I was very skittish and cautious at first because, like, man, like, I just don't connect with people, just because. And for him to hit me up out of the blue, I was like, "Who is this dude?" And I had no idea at the time that I got a industry titan just hitting me up randomly, right? So I'm like, okay, I don't know who the hell this guy is. Let me hit up Morris. So, I hit up Morris Beagle. I'm like, hey, bro, who is this Robert Hoban guy? And, Mo's like, oh, Bob's good people, man. You'll enjoy him, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, all right, well, if you speaking for him, okay, bet, So then I kind of got to digging around a little bit. And I'm like, oh, shit, this is a real dude, So that's how we initially kind of hit it off, and I just get more and more impressed, with Bob, as time goes on. And when it comes to Bob's accolades and accomplishments thus far, I wouldn't do him justice trying to just ramble on, off the top of my head what he's done. So I'm just gonna read to you some of the things that this gentleman, has accomplished in this space. Bob started the first international hemp and cannabis centric law firm, the Hoban Law Group, in 2018. When he sold it, okay, so you got to be doing good for you to sell your law firm, your cannabis law firm, to somebody else, right? Then he sold it to an international law firm, Clark and Hill. After establishing Clark and Hill's new market Denver office and leading its cannabis industry group and international prominence, Bob elected to step away from the legal practice and focus his time on non-legal work in the cannabis space. He's currently serves as fractional C executive, CEO, strategy officer, chairman of C Trust, cannabis industry credit rating dev monitoring entity, strategic advisor, developer of global cannabis supply chain companies, capital deployment advisor to numerous investment funds, and contributor, at Forbes. So he actually writes for Forbes, and I'm like, holy shit, this dude randomly hit me up, really? Wow. And Bob sits at the center of a massive commercial cannabis industry network that has cultivated since 2018. He's an attorney, an entrepreneur, professor, and an executive. He's a visionary industry leader who has founded, created, brought, and sold over 15 of his own cannabis companies. He has served as a C-suite executive in multiple companies and as director on a number of boards. Bob served a one of the nation's first cannabis policy professors at the University of Denver from 2011 to 2018. He's crafted cannabis policy solutions for dozens of U.S. jurisdictions and over 30 different countries around the world. He's consistently been recognized as one of the most influential people in the global cannabis industry by a variety of organizations and publications over the course of the past 16 years, including Forbes magazine, 42 most influential people in cannabis. And it's like as I'm learning more and more about him, I'm like, man, this dude is a friend of mine. Like, what is he thinking about? I'm riffraff. This is the man. And when people ask me questions, they come to me, they ask me things, and I am a mutt, guys. You think of a dog, a mutt, that's a combination of a bunch of different breeds. I am a mutt when it comes to cannabis professionals. And Bob is one of those. He's one of those people that I can hit up. I can ask things, get clear, concise guidance of what I need to do, where I need to go. And he's always been a friendly ear to me. So I couldn't be, more thankful to do this, with Bob, and just let you guys hear some things from him. So with that being said, Bob, can you hear me okay?
I hear you just great, and thank you for the kind intro. And listen, JJ, when I first saw you coming into NoCo, I saw some of your stuff online. So I,
Really?
I reached out because I saw this energy and this knowledge, and you were coming at it with a perspective that I could really appreciate. So the feeling is mutual, my friend, and it's good to be here. And unfortunately, we're talking about what's not great news in the hemp industry these days, but there is a silver lining, I believe.
Yeah, yeah, and as do I, and I think I'm fortunate, in my military, background, of 21 years, because in the military, like, it's not all roses every day. Like, you're gonna get new bosses, new commanders. You're not gonna agree with their vision, but you still got to be there. And if you salute smartly, nod and say yes sir, no sir, and you cater to their pet peeve long enough, they're gonna leave before you do. And you get to keep on going on, and that's what I think I've been doing, since I've been in this space. I look at the layout, I look at the rules, I look at where things are, and it's like, okay, rather than bucking all the rules and getting pissed off about it, how can I make money with these rules that are in place? How can I navigate, with these rules that are in place? And that's why I'm fortunate, for being, connected, with people like you and several others, in this space, because it's like, hey, I'm not trying to buck the system. I'm just trying to understand the current layout better so we can, move forward and do what we can. And as they gather data and they gather research, now people are going to gradually become more comfortable over time instead of everybody just trying to pound everybody again up, upside the head to make, no, we're not doing that. The only thing is decriminalization right now, and it's like, yes, that's where we want to be. But in the United States, we've got close to a 100-year history of not doing these things, and the data points US based have to start to be collected. So I'm always honored to see your work, how you put things out there when you write for Forbes and whatnot. And man, I got to start off by asking, like, what made someone like you get involved with this crazy plant that we call cannabis?
That's a great question. Well, listen, I am no stranger to the plant itself. Um,
Word.
I have a very personal relationship with the plant and have for many, many, many years. Um, I I spent a lot of time in Grateful Dead parking lots
Yeah,
for
man.
some of my early years. So I did become quite fond of it, and you know I. I've always appreciated cannabis because of it. For me personally, whether it's athletic performance, I'm a basketball player. I'm an athlete. I always keep active. Whether it's athletic performance, which cannabis helps with immensely,
Hmm.
recovery, or just creativity. Like I said, as a lawyer, you're kind of trained to go from A to B to C, and that's still the standard. But if I'm given I tried a lot of cases in my days. If you're going to give an opening statement or a closing statement, you can't just say A plus B equals C, so I win. That doesn't
Right.
convince people. So that creative element is what cannabis sort of opened up for me inside. When I was prepared, when I knew tomorrow I had to give an opening statement in the morning, that night before, after I did all my work, I sat down and I would open up that door and in just a more creative side of my brain opened up that allowed
Yeah.
me to communicate things in a way that still said A plus B equals C, and therefore I win. But I said it in a way that was more interesting, more compelling, more creative, and maybe a little bit more objective. So that's my relationship with the plant. But my relationship with the plant goes a little bit deeper. Excuse me. And it is my mother was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer
Mm.
in 2005. She was told she had 6 months to live. She was given the whole regimen of pancreatic cancer, the opiates. Many people know that drill. And cannabis was a welcome relief, an alternative. And ultimately, my mother did live for about 3.5 years in
Wow.
that period of time. Ultimately, pancreatic cancer is a tough one, but in beginning to source cannabis through Colorado's then medical marijuana program, um, I started to talk to people. Hey,
Hmm.
my mother's got this. How can you help? And it was, to put it bluntly, it was kind of like a bunch of old hippie couples, mostly,
Yeah,
right?
man.
And there wasn't just the couples. There was the guy who would say, "Hey, man, meet me at 7-Eleven. I got the best stuff in town." There was that guy, a bunch of that guy. But then there were people that said, hey, I make crackers, I make cookies, I make oils, whatever it might be. Let me, come by. We'll tell you what we've got and see if that helps your mom. And we tried some things for a while, and she benefited from that. I wish I knew even a fraction about the science that I know today. I wish
Right,
there were stores we could have walked in back in the day and said, let's try this and this and this and this. I wish there were doctors that I knew of. I know that there were doctors back then. I didn't know those doctors. There weren't as
right,
many of them as there are today.
right.
So I wish there all of that stuff happened, and I'm still a little bitter about that. But
Yeah,
that opened the door for me. I started to say, well, look, if this is a brand new industry starting in Colorado and California and a few other states, if this is brand new, um, why don't I put my name out there? Why don't I make my firm the cannabis law firm? And when I say cannabis, let's be clear about this. Cannabis is the plant. I
right.
I see it as having two distinct sectors. You got the hemp sector and you got the marijuana sector. And a lot of people think cannabis is just marijuana because they've tried to reframe it as such. But in any event, that's kind of my story. And I started a law firm, first national, then the first international cannabis law firm, where we
Hmm.
did more than just criminal law. We did employment law, tax law, contracts, commercial transactions, finance, patents. I got lawyers all over the country and built up the firm. So that's my personal story, how I got into the cannabis industry. My mom had a lot to do with that, at least whether she knows it or not. She drove me, and here we are. And I sold that firm, as you point out, and still involved pretty deeply in discussing policy, writing policy all over the world, and consulting for national and international companies in the space. So it's been a long ride. I hope it continues on longer and longer. I wouldn't, JD, if cannabis didn't come around, I don't know if I would have stayed a lawyer.
Yeah,
I tried cases for banks, for companies. It was all about money. How much did I earn and didn't get? How much do they owe me? This and that, and was good at that, but that was not particularly fulfilling. So opening up
yeah,
the industry was really really great, and because of the industry, I've met so many friends, developed a relationship with so many people around the world that I would have probably never, ever, ever met before. And I think you and I have talked about this before. This industry brings the most interesting people. And I want to say every person you meet is a character, but that kind of makes it sound bad. Like if I said to you, oh, everyone you meet in our industry, they're all characters. I mean that in the most loving way, but they're all characters. We're all characters. We all
that's a
are.
fact.
So
Yeah.
so anyway, so that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah, no, man, and it's a wonderful story, and I mean, we got different origins, with the plant. I mean, I was Air Force for 21 years. I wouldn't touch this plant, prior to 2016. But after I retired, there was a project that, I had to help put together. And my father passed away from lung cancer when I was 20, and a lot like you, if I had have known then what I know now, there is no way that my father, not, he wouldn't have died from cancer. He probably would have died. He probably would have drunk himself to death or something else. It wouldn't have been the cancer,
Right.
that got him.
Right.
And, that kind of gave me the internal motivation, that internal mission to always, be there and help, and shout out to the OGs, right? Shout outs to those people that are in the tie-dye shirts and the long hair and
Yes.
whatnot, because those are the people that I hung out with when I first got out of the military. That's where the root of my education came from. Those people that didn't look or act like what I was used to. And they were very welcoming to me. They were very open to me, and I learned a lot. And I always try to pay, homage to them. But there's some characters at the same time too. So you gotta learn to leverage that. And I myself, being involved with this plant, being a veteran, owning a CBD brand, like I want to be that veteran that one day that gets it across to the military, right? At DOD level. Hey, it is okay for people to take CBD on active duty if they're taking the right kind of CBD that doesn't contain THC, right? So you don't fail drug tests. And I can back that up with data. I was a lab tech in the Air Force. I've got the slides that show exactly why people fail drug tests. So I have a much deeper mission than just being in this space and just being involved. And if you ever need somebody to go out and lay down that basic education framework for any of your clients before you dive in and talk about the deep stuff, brother, let me know. I can do that basic hemp 101 stuff for anybody at any point in time. I can take that off your plate. And then when they come to you day one, they're like, all right, Bob, we're ready to go. We're ready to talk specifically about this, because we've got the basics down. Um, but man, you touched on something else. We're at a really interesting, I call it an inflection point, because like you stated, you're involved with cannabis, but cannabis is the plant, just like hemp and marijuana, are both cannabis, apples and oranges are both fruits, and we reached a critical point in this space to where, industrial hemp, the true intent, I don't care what anybody says, I'm speaking from a factual standpoint, right? Hemp was not meant to get people high. Period. It was meant for the industrial purposes, the ropes, the ship sails. BMW and Audi use it in their door panels. The first and second draft of the Declaration of Independence written on hemp paper. Just all of this great stuff from an industrial standpoint. But whether it was on purpose or not, there was some language included in the 2018 Farm Bill that allowed cannabinoids to be able to, wiggle their toes in the door. And some people will say that it was on purpose. Some people will say it was not on purpose. I don't know. I don't care. My name is not Mitch McConnell. My name isn't any of these others, right? I don't know whether it was on purpose or not. All I know is it went unchecked for way too long. And now they're trying to close that loophole, which I commend, right? But at the same time, since it went unchecked for so long, it's kind of like having a 3 or 4 year old baby, right? And then someone comes along and say, hey, about that kid that you had, man, we were supposed to do something with those rules for having children, but we didn't get it across the finish line in time. So we're going to need you to put that child back where you got it from. It doesn't work like that,
It doesn't work that way.
it doesn't work that way. So, man, what do you see happening moving forward? Because in my opinion, I see them saying, hey, you got to get intoxicating stuff out of hemp because we got to move forward with hempcrete projects. We got to move forward with Patagonia clothing lines. We have to move forward with all of this stuff. And that is what hemp is going to be. Do you see them or foresee somebody doing something special with cannabinoids, whether it's intoxicating or non-intoxicating, synthetic versus non-synthetic? How do you see that shaking out in the future?
Well, let me before I jump in it, let me pick up on your inflection point thing because I agree with you 1,000%. This is the most significant hemp industry, cannabis industry overall inflection point since the 2018 Farm Bill.
Hmm.
Uh, After years of, explosive growth, followed by all this fragmentation, the market's now entering a period of forced consolidation and regulatory restructuring. Uh,
Right.
the demand for cannabinoids is really, really high. And
Hmm.
the federal framework, which we had until, well, we still have it for another year. I'll talk specifically about what happened in DC in a moment.
Right.
But but what we had was this language that basically descheduled everything out of the hemp plant.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
while that language was intentional, because the black and white language says all salts, all isomers, all compounds, all
Yep.
derivatives, all
Yep.
of it's descheduled. Um, there was just like everything that happens policy wise, there's never a complete understanding of what the repercussions of those things would be, right?
Right.
So industrial hemp, the true industrial uses, fiber, grain, food, it's been strengthening, but this is a story we've heard for decades and decades and decades. Cannabinoid hemp or botanical hemp or floral hemp, whatever you want to call it, versus industrial hemp, that's kind of the lay of the land right now. And let me just, you know, tell you why I think we're here. When 2014 was when the
Yep.
first Farm Bill was signed. First
Hmm.
time in US history where they identified hemp as something different than marijuana, and it was descheduled. But it was descheduled for one of three purposes: scientific, agricultural, or market based research. So
Hmm.
then I and other lawyers said, well, if you're a hemp company, start operating. Because how can you do market research without a market? So
Right.
enter the market. And that's kind of the notion that took off. And that started with a lot of CBD.
Right.
So, but why did it start with CBD? So CBD is today's intoxicating hemp derivative. It, CBD is not intoxicating per se. but it's the same thing. What happened in 2014, 15 was everyone started making CBD products. CBD went from something no one ever heard of before, including me, by the way. I never heard of CBD until cannabidiol until 2013. And in 2014, I wrote an opinion letter for some of the biggest CBD companies in the country at the time.
Hmm.
There was four or five of them all together: Hemp Meds, um, Charlotte's Web,
Hmm.
um, Cannabis. There were two or three others, and they were all basically working. And they were saying, "Are we selling something that's legal?" And yes, CBD is not a controlled substance. But why did the hemp industry and all these great uses that we know about the hemp plant, whether it's building or textiles or personal goods or durable goods or gasoline or plastics, all this great stuff, why do we always start with consumables? And that's what I mean, JJ, when I say CBD is like intoxicating hemp derivatives today. Why
Hmm.
was it that nothing really got going until the consumables started going?
Hmm.
Well, in part, the other stuff takes some things that are not easy to come by. Number
Fact.
one, it takes adoption.
Right.
If I'm going to make gasoline from hemp or plastic from hemp or something I see Drew Kidd on the phone with building materials from hemp. If you're looking at um, materials, why did those things take so long, and still do to evolve? It's adoption, in my opinion. And adoption is twofold. You need corporate adoption or business adoption. You need the market to adopt
Right.
beginning to use hemp materials. If I make a plastic bottle, instead of making that plastic bottle with, chemical plastic, I should be making it with hemp, or at least in part with hemp. But
Right.
I have to adopt that. I have to make that my corporate or business thing. And that's been a challenge. The second type of adoption you need is political adoption,
Yes.
right? For
Hmm.
the first time, we had Donald Trump in 2018, the first time the president was talking about hemp, say, "Oh, I'm going to sign the Farm Bill into existence." Now, we'll talk about what he just did with his pen a couple of weeks ago, but he was taken it out of existence. So
Right.
I'm not saying Donald Trump is hemp savior by no stretch of the imagination, but it was that political adoption back in 2018 when he signed that Farm Bill that gave us that. So you need those things, and they're not easy to come by. Then you need infrastructure. You can't just turn hemp into gasoline.
That's the one.
Even building
Hmm.
materials, turning hemp into building materials is about as easy as it comes, but it's still not easy, right? You need a lot of material. That material has to have a certain amount of the herd, amount of the wood. You have to have
Right.
a good mixture. You have to have that a mixture, meaning usually it's a lime compound that
Hmm.
creates the binder to create the
And
building
you got to have
material.
the decortication equipment to separate the herd from the fiber. You know what I'm saying?
And
So yeah.
you need that material, that plant material close to where you're going to build something. You
Right.
can't grow my plant material in Colorado and go build a house with that plant material in North Carolina. I'm sure
Hmm.
some people have done that, but that doesn't make a lot of sense to ship plant material halfway across
That
the country
far.
or more, right? That adds cost.
Right.
And so there's better ways to do it. So it's that infrastructure. You talk about decortication. It's a simple process, right? You're beating the stick so that the fiber can be peeled off. But
Right.
that's not simple. It's simple equipment, but to do it on an industrial scale
The
costs a
scale.
lot of money. So
Absolutely.
you never really had the adoption of the infrastructure. So what do you need to make a consumable from the hemp plant, whether that's delta or delta 9 THC or CBD? All you need is an extraction machine or
Yep.
maybe a
Or you
couple
can or
different
you can
kinds.
go old school, get you some ethanol, soak it all, and do manual methods.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if that's the easy way to do it and there's a higher price point, for someone buying a bottle of CBD from me or a bottle of Delta 9 THC from me versus buying a house from me or
Right.
buying hemp plastic machinery from me, that's why we're in this scenario.
I
And
agree.
here's another reason why. It's the same point, but at the time that CBD started to become what it became. We also had a bunch of marijuana states. So getting equipment for extraction to use in the marijuana states was easy to do.
Hmm.
Everybody was aggregating these secondhand and new machines from all over the world, and they were coming to the United States or being used in the United States. So it was easy to come by a $12,000 or $15,000 extraction machine, or to your point, JJ, throwing it into an ethanol machine that already exists and pull the cannabinoids out. The point being is higher price point, easier process. That's the way to the market. The market is like water, right? It follows the path of least resistance. So
Absolutely
if I
true.
want to make
Yep.
if I want to make Legos, if I want to make blue jeans, if I want to make drywall, if I want to make flooring, all these things exist with hemp, but not on a scale that
Right.
makes it achievable with the right price point. If I want to
Mhm.
put hemp flooring in my kitchen, it's going to cost more than the bamboo flooring or the pre-laminate flooring or even the hardwood flooring in certain cases,
Mhm.
depending on the wood. It's
Right.
because we don't have the infrastructure and the scale to make
Right.
those things cost less right now. So
Hmm.
anyway, so that's why we're here. Then the last reason why we're here with consumables is in when the CBD boom and the CBD craze went nuts, the United States registered. We didn't grow, but we registered something like 225,000 hectare acres of hemp.
Hmm.
That's a lot of
Hmm.
hemp, even though it's still a small little cultivation industry. That's a
Right.
lot of hemp. We didn't grow that much, but what we did grow was sitting around in warehouses because the companies that were going to make CBD out of it, they couldn't buy the CBD because they didn't have any money. Why didn't they have any
Right.
money? Because you couldn't sell CBD in normal places because it wasn't approved by the FDA or the equivalent. So you had this sort of catch-22 where I can get a higher price point for CBD, but I can't really sell it next to toothpaste and deodorant. So what am I going to do with it? And so then
Yeah.
all that plant material sat in fields, and you had Americans and American entrepreneurialism and capitalism. Those two things combined don't sit still very long. And
Nope.
so there were some guys that sat around and said, there's all this hemp sitting around, probably still sitting out in the field or a warehouse somewhere.
Hmm.
I could get it for pennies on the dollar. And you know what I can do with that? I could take the THC out of it, or I can make Delta 8, Delta 10,
Hmm.
HHC, all these other intoxicating compounds from it. So
Yep.
still cheaper process, easier process. The plant material was cheaper than it was when it was fresh because it was sitting around for a while.
Hmm.
And there were no places to sell the CBD and you had a higher price point for intoxicating compounds. So in a nutshell, JD, that's why we're here.
Yeah. Yep. And
So
and it's crazy that you mentioned all this because I observed some of this stuff firsthand in working and dealing with farmers. And what you have is, so first of all, right, a lot of farmers didn't know the difference between growing for industrial and growing for cannabinoids. So they're just growing what they think is going because they're used to the traditional farming model, right? Where they take all the risk up front. They pay for their own seeds. They've got their own equipment. They've got their own planters, their own harvesters, and all of this stuff. So they're traditionally used to taking all the risk up front. And then once they harvest a traditional crop, they take it to farmers market and they sell it. And that's what
yeah,
they're used to. And that's where, part of my friends, that's where some of these assholes in cannabis took advantage of these farmers. And I really don't like it because they knew that these farmers weren't going to be able to make certain marks right out the gate cannabinoid wise. They knew this crap, right? So they let them take all the risk up front. And now they grow this crop. Then oh crap, we don't have anywhere to dry it, right? So they're scrambling to dry it. And then once they dry it, they realize they have to trim it. And now they've got all of these buds sitting around that nobody wants to buy. And if you don't buy it for so long, those buds start to dry out, they start to mold, so they take even more risk and they'll convert it to an oil so that it's stable longer, get it to crude oil so that it's stabilized longer. And all the while these people are just sitting back watching these farmers break their back, and then they want to scoop in at the last second, make them a low ball offer, and that's what happened, and it's really unfortunate. But moving forward, kind of, to where we're at now and what we're talking about, I think one pivotal question to kind of kick things off is, it's no secret I'm the CEO of Active Duty RX, right? I own a CBD brand myself. Our products are THC free. So in terms of these THC bans and whatnot, like on the surface, I don't give a rip because my products don't contain THC. I got one product that has a little bit of Delta 9 that's below zero point 0.3, but it's majority CBN, right? To help people sleep and get great quality rest. But when we've bought all the distillate there is to buy, right? And things like that, if people can't have seeds to grow more crops to be able to get that, that's a problem, even for products like Epidiolex, which is approved by the FDA, right? So what do you foresee, and I know Drew's probably interested in this, from a seed cultivation standpoint, moving forward, what they could possibly do with that.
Yeah, yeah. The seed thing is it's it's going to shake some things up. Now, all right, so I just got some notes here. So let me just open the notes up so I can refer
Okay.
back to some of the things. All right. So a lot of things happened in this bill. So let's just level set there, right? The bill, it was snuck in at the last minute as a resolution to open the government out, right? And Rand Paul dug his heels in, but McConnell was so angry that all of this intoxicating stuff came out of what he thought was going to be an industrial boom.
Mhm.
Um, and again, typical politician that doesn't understand how markets work, right? Just because you create legislation doesn't mean that markets adopt it. There's a missing piece, and the government cannot be that one that holds your hand to the market. That's not what the
Right,
government's supposed to do. So the government creates this law, and then there's all this stuff that had to happen and is happening slowly because of the infrastructure piece that got us there. So they redefined how you measure THC in hemp to include more than just Delta 9 THC. So that 0.3% remains the same, but now
mhm.
they want to throw a bunch of other compounds in there. Anything that could get you high, anything
Right,
intoxicating, JJ, for example.
right,
So that
right.
all rolls into the definition of THC. Um, it also, to your point about the seeds, it said some really interesting things about the seeds, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But here's the most important thing.
Mhm.
This does not take effect until November 12th of
2026.
2026.
Mhm.
Many people don't see this as a ban of hemp or a reframe of hemp. It's a chance to give 1 year to figure out how to regulate this part of the industry.
Right,
Because, like it or not, intoxicating products from hemp are cheaper to produce from a supply chain standpoint, and the supply chain requires it. Here's why it requires it. Because hemp beverages, THC Delta 9 beverages from hemp, just grew wild during these last couple of years.
mhm.
If marijuana is rescheduled to 3, which is probably what happens if anything happens, not descheduling, not the declassification,
Right,
then how can I make a THC beverage and sell it in the mainstream, meaning at grocery stores and liquor stores and ball games and concerts, like it is sold everywhere else right now with hemp, without it being from hemp? If it's from
right,
marijuana, right now it's prohibited, or it's in that closed loop system.
right,
If it's from hemp, then I can sell it anywhere. Plus, it's low dose if it's from hemp. Low
right,
dose beverages don't sell in dispensaries. So you do need THC from hemp for basic mass market THC products, but that remains to be seen how that's going to be regulated.
right.
Let's talk about seeds.
Mhm.
A couple of years ago, there was a lawyer here in Denver. That lawyer wrote a letter to the DEA and said, "Hey, DEA, I need clarification. Hemp, pardon me, any cannabis product or plant that's below 0.3% Delta 9 THC is considered hemp and is federally legal." All right, I follow you. So then What about seeds? Seeds, even if that seed's going to produce a beautiful marijuana flower with 28% delta 9 THC, it's
Hmm.
still going to test below 0.3% when it's a seed.
Correct.
In fact, it's probably going to test below 0.3% up until about 30 days, 20 days before harvest.
Right.
So the DEA wrote back to this lawyer and said, "Yes, sir, you're correct. All seeds are considered hemp seeds." So that changed everything dramatically. You didn't see marijuana seeds, cannabis seeds being sold in every smoke shop, in gas stations, in head shops. You didn't see that everywhere. I certainly didn't. Maybe in
Hmm.
certain states it was the case, but you didn't see seeds sold because if I was selling a marijuana seed, I risked selling a marijuana seed and getting prosecuted either under state or federal law for that.
Right.
But when the DEA says, no, 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 it's okay as long as it's below 0.3%, then the big seed companies, the ones from Europe in particular, Dutch Passion, Royal Queen, but the list goes on, and some US companies as well. They said, well, let's start selling marijuana seeds in the US. That started to create some problems, or at least to the politicians, it created some problems, right?
Hmm.
Um, Now, the language now says hemp does not include, quote, any viable seeds from a cannabis plant that exceed a total THC concentration of 0.3% in the plant. And it also talked about um, what plant the seed came from.
Hmm.
So the seed's not going to have above 0.3%, but it matters what the mother of that seed's plant was.
Right.
So if I grow a marijuana plant and I seed it out, does that marijuana plant have above 0.3% delta 9 THC? Um, More often than not,
Well,
yes, but especially at the time of the seeds. Um,
right.
so if it's above zero point 0.3, then it's considered a marijuana seed. If that plant was below zero point 0.3, the total THC, then it's considered a hemp seed. So that
Right.
changes things a lot. Now, if I want to grow industrial crops, I'm going to buy certified seeds probably from Europe, OECD registered seeds anyway, or from
Hmm.
Canada, right? Maybe China. The Chinese seed goes around as well. There's big seeds, but they're
Right.
they're intended to grow plants that don't necessarily come to flower. Those are all certified seeds. JJ, they're basically guaranteed to never, I mean, never go above 0.3%. That's why they're successful and that's why they're registered and certified. Now, I'm
Right.
sure there's exceptions to every rule, but
Hmm.
that's why people buy certified seed. So now if I'm going to grow hemp, I got to be really careful about where my seeds are coming from. Now, one other workaround for the seed part is it says seeds. It doesn't say clones, doesn't say tissue culture. It says
Hmm.
seeds.
Hmm.
So under this carve out, it's not what the seed will grow into, it's what it came from.
Right.
And that's kind of the situation. So if you have tissue cultures or if you have clones, does that still mean that those are prohibited too if they came from a marijuana plant? Because many of the CBD or high THC varieties for the THCA flower varieties,
Hmm.
which are now effectively banned, um, those seeds, those clones they're designed to produce flowers with a lot of resin. And those flowers with a lot of resin, if brought to full maturity, usually exceed 0.3% delta 9,
Right.
certainly with the total THC. So
And
that's where we
And
are.
and here's the thing about that, and I'm speaking from I used to own a testing laboratory that was registered with the DEA, for handling controlled substances. And me being in the industry, for many years, I know for a fact, unless you've seen something different, but when you're looking at a certified seed, you're not looking at the certification on the seed that you're holding. You're looking at the certification from two or three varieties prior that made it out to flower, and they took buds, from those varieties, and they tested them to make sure that they were below zero point 0.3. And if they were, then yeah, this seed that you're holding, may, be the case. But I don't want anybody to be, disillusioned and think that the seed that you're holding is that seed is below zero. No, that's from what it was grown, what it came from. It's not what you're currently holding. So when people are looking at this, seed thing, understand. And THC kind of works in a plant, kind of like cortisol works in the human body. When we get stressed as people, we spike cortisol. Well, when the more you stress these plants out, the more that THC, kind of starts to spike, as time goes on. And certain varieties or certain species will, grow more or they're meant to grow more THC than others, So, my personal sentiment, and Drew can chime in on this if he wants, but like if you take any seed and you stress it out enough, who knows what that actual seed is gonna become? If it's not grown or given the proper amount of nutrients.
Yeah, 1000%. And right now, the practical guidance, right? What's the practical guidance? The practical guidance is that any seed that is going to produce high quantities of resins, or is genetically engineered to do that, is probably not going to qualify as hemp anymore. And it
Mhm.
matters what the plant comes from. It doesn't matter what the chemical makeup of that plant is. It just matters where it comes from. And again, we got 1 year to take advantage of this. I was talking to some seed companies that I've worked with for years. They're trying to figure out what to do, right? And I
Mhm.
said to them, I said, well, when do your guys usually buy their seed? Well, they buy their seed between January and, in April. Okay. When do they plant their seed? They plant their seed in April, May, depending on where in the country they are. When do they harvest? They harvest in October, Croptober. All right. So why not sell another round of seed? That's all out of your hands before November 12th of 2026, the 1 year when this takes effect, assuming nothing else changes.
Right.
But we don't know if consumer behavior or cultivator behavior is going to change.
Right. And I have to give a huge shout out to Barbara Philippone, in this space because, Barbara's the only person that I know of that has, developed some equipment to properly clean these seeds to get all that resin off of these seeds, prior to doing certain things to ensure that they don't accidentally go hot just because of the resin that was left, on the seeds previously and things like that. There may be other people that are out there doing it, but like she's the first one that I know of that has, gone and done it the right way, So seeds are definitely going to be big. It's going to be huge. I wanted to take a minute and see if anyone, out here wanted to unmute and I don't want to make it seem like it's the Bob and JJ show. I want other people to have a chance to ask questions, if they have them as well. So, is there anyone out there who wants to unmute and ask a question directly to Bob yourself? I mean, this dude is a titan, in this space. And if you don't ask the question to him, like you're messing up, like for real. Let's see. I'm looking at the microphones to see if anybody's gonna unmute. And if they don't unmute, I can certainly, jabber on. But I just wanted to give other people the opportunity. Well, I guess we must
Oh,
be doing okay,
all right.
Bob. We must be. Oh, there we go.
I'll ask a question just because I'm
What's
here.
up, Drew? What you got, man?
How you doing? So I'm curious, Bob, as far as timeline with policy. Like, obviously, the clock's ticking. We have until, late November of next year. But to move a bill forward is going to take a considerable amount of time. And, there's different groups that are pushing for different suggestions on what's the best next step. And from what I've seen, it seems like the best next step is just to try to get an extension. So I've seen some requests with regards to this policy to extend it out another 18 months just to give the industry time to come up with a proper policy, in that the previous policy and the new policy are so far apart. There has to be a meeting in the middle to continue this $28 billion industry and all of these jobs that have been created. But what would your strategy be to, with this timeline, to find the meeting in the middle?
Well, I think that the immediate strategy, Drew, and it's a great question. We'll talk about the federal piece in a minute. The immediate strategy is something I'm not hearing anybody talk about. The immediate strategy is to go to the states that have the hemp laws that allow Colorado, Texas, North Carolina, Florida. The list goes on and on and on to states that have a really robust presence. To your point about the jobs, those $28 billion in revenue, those thousands and thousands of jobs, all that millions and millions of dollars, it's almost $1 billion worth of infrastructure in the US that supports this industry. All of that stuff, those people need to go to the states in which they operate and which the top 10 states in which their products are sold. And they need to start writing letters to the departments that oversee the laws. So, for example, if I'm talking about Colorado, I should be writing a letter to, and I don't just mean a letter like, hey, how you doing, CDPHE? I mean, usually a formal process that says I can get a position statement from the government on a particular issue. So then I would write that letter under that thing and say, hey, Colorado CDPHE, the FDA equivalent. Um, you saw what happened in DC a couple of weeks ago. Does this change anything for you? They're going to have to respond. No, the law is the law for us. Unless the legislature changes the law, then we're going to continue to follow this law. Second question, do you intend to ban hemp after this November 12th of 2026? No, we don't plan to do anything because we're just an agency that has to follow the law as it's written in our state. All right. So that's one piece. That tells me that I'm going to be able to keep staying open and keep doing business under these rules. It tells me that if somebody tries to come shut me down, that I've got a licensing partner that needs to go to bat for me in a lawsuit if somebody tries to shut me down in the state. Second thing I do is I get my hemp-friendly politicians in our state houses or the governor's office, and I get them to sign on to a letter that says, this is a travesty. We have 3,000 jobs, $1 billion in infrastructure, and 11 whatever million dollars, $100 million of industry in our state. Those are the things that matter right now. People need to have the comfort. Their consumers, their buyers, their investors need to know that no matter what, the states that they operate in are going to continue to support the industry and let it be business as usual. Because it doesn't matter what happens at the federal level next year if nothing happens. The states are going to continue to do business the way they're doing business today. You think that Colorado is going to tell people that manufacture these compounds to stop? The state the state government's not going to shut down an entire industry. And the states are not just going to follow the lead of the federal government, especially states that might be a little bit more right leaning. Of course, they're not going to follow the federal government because they don't do what their daddy tells them to do. And if you're a Democrat state,
Texas,
you
Texas
don't
is going to tell you
Texas.
to come take it.
Damn right. Damn right. And if you're a blue state, you're not going to follow what the Republicans in DC told you to do. So at the end of the day, I think that that's the most important thing that people could be doing right now. I'm not hearing anybody talk about that. Now, here's the thing. The industry got itself into this position because there was no strong lobby presence, more than a couple of dozen businesses max. And I'm not going to name groups because it makes it sound like I have sour grapes. I don't have sour grapes about anything. I've worked with all these groups over years. My clients have been involved with all the different trade groups over the years. I find some of them good, some of them not so good, but that's not my position to tell you what's good and what's bad. The point being is there are so many small groups that are inconsistent, that are not talking to each other, that it created a scenario where nobody wanted to hear what they had to say. So, JJ, if I'm in DC and I'm a politician and I'm hearing from big alcohol and big marijuana and, maybe even pharma, and I hear there's 20 different hemp groups all going, hey, I'm the big guy. I'm the big guy. Look at me. Look at me. If that's what I hear, I'm not going to pay attention to any of them. And that's what happened. And that's why we got rolled, because there is no unifying, consistent, or reputable voice in our space. So you'd think that after getting smacked in the side of the head by Washington, D.C., that these groups would all come together, right? You'd think that all of a
Yeah.
sudden they'd say, no, no, no. Let's work together. Let's build bridges, stop building walls. Let's stop digging moats. Let's build a road between us. No, 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 no. It's even worse than it was before, JJ. Drew, it's even worse than it was
That's
before.
crazy, man.
Every single group is now saying, you got to do it my way. You got to do it. And what are they doing? They're saying, well, here's our policy position. We support a milligram cap on products, or we support beverages only, or we support this. You guys just got your ass handed to you because there was no coherence about the
Yeah.
industry. And now you dare come out and go, well, this is the policy that we want. It's absurd. It's like a child who gets in trouble by their parents, who refuses to hear anything that their parents are saying, and they keep saying, "But I want to play with those toys. Give me those toys back." And that's what the industry's doing now. It is so juvenile, so infantile, and the groups are still not talking to each other. And guess what? If that keeps up, they're all going to get rolled again. And guess who's going to suffer? Our friends, our businesses, our clients. So it's a bleak thing, not because the federal government doesn't want to work with us. It's because there's no consistent voice. There's no one that can take their ego out of the situation for 5 flipping seconds to work together with somebody else. It's got to be, no, we've been around the longest, so you got to follow our lead. And meanwhile, they're talking gibberish. They're going, oh, this is the policy we support. We support caps on this or caps on that. Nobody cares what your policy position is. You just got your toys taken away from you. Stop asking for your toys back and get together with everybody else and figure out a new way to play with each other.
Yeah.
And when you do that, then maybe mom and dad will consider giving you another toy. And that's where we are. And that sounds really, really condescending the way I'm saying it.
Hey, man,
But
that's
Drew, it
truth,
is
bro.
awful. It's going on.
That's truth. That is straight truth. And Bob, like I said, man, if there is anybody that's in a position to lay the smack down, however it needs to be laid down, it's you, bro. So please keep bringing that truth because people need to hear this shit. And they need to hear it from more people than myself, more people than Drew. They need to be heard from people like you that are doing prominent things at the DC level. You're in the rooms. Like you're working in the rooms, and I hope I'm not getting too far ahead of myself, but I think you've been involved with drafting certain things to move forward to the president. So if you've been able to draft things, whether he signs off on them or not, I think you've been through a lot of shit to be able to get to where you're at to do the things that you're doing. So if there's anybody who sees where we're going wrong, it's you, man, and you know, you got to do what you're doing and put this message out there. And, one of the things that, you guys were talking about, there aren't conversations taking place. Now, I hosted a good friend of mine and business partner last week, Ryan Early, and we were talking about how the FDA has 90 days to establish what they consider intoxicating cannabinoids, right? Have you heard anything about that? Or, because I think that's, step one. It's like, hey, from an FDA standpoint, here's what we classify as intoxicating. Like, have you heard anything about that or know what's happening with that currently?
I'm not sure whether that process, because of the way all of this was done, right?
Hmm.
This was not done through a formal legislative process. By the way, that's the other thing that makes me mad about this whole thing. It was done sneaky. This is not
Yeah.
democracy. There was no debates at the committee level. This was this was just shove it in and see what happens. That's not democracy. And I don't blame that on the leaders in Washington, D.C. today. I blame that on the entire system for thinking that somehow, some way that this is okay. But at the end of the day, I don't know what we can hope for, except I really, really believe that reasonable minds should they get on the same page, can come together and figure out how to regulate this plant, this side of the industry with the sort of that four-pillared structure, meaning age gating if it's intoxicating, testing, label standards, and ultimately supply chain pieces that make sure that everything is done in a consumer friendly way. And then having limits on all of that. So those are the things that I believe are going to come out of this because the
Mhm.
supply chain does require, it's not a nice thing to have, it's a requirement that the supply chain has access to hemp cannabinoids for a variety of different things. It's the only way it's going to work. It's the only
Right.
way other industries work. But somehow, some way, we're sitting here and folks are sort of advancing their myopic view of what went wrong, and everyone's trying to protect themselves. The beverage sector saying, "Well, just carve us out. Just let us stay and get the other guys. They're bad guys. Get rid of the other guys." And then the industrial folks, "Oh, get rid of the intoxicating guys." And the intoxicating guys are saying, well, we're the only one that ever made any money. The point is, everybody's in this together. If you want a hemp sector that plays, the product should be regulated at the use level, not at the
Mhm.
planting level, and that's part of the problem that we see. Can it sort itself out? I think it will, but I don't know what's going to give. I look for a new trade organization to step up and be influential because I don't think any of the trade organizations, and I mean any of them, are worthy of following unless they all work together. And right now they're saying,
I'm
"Follow me."
glad you
No, no,
said
I
it.
got the answer, you
I'm
know?
glad you said it because there are certain entities who shall remain nameless, but I'm tired of getting them damn emails, right? About all the industries in jeopardy. They're doing this. It's like, okay, well, you're supposed to be a prominent entity, that's doing certain things, but it's like you're not even telling the whole story. You're not telling the whole truth. You're only telling the part of the truth that benefits your profit margins. And that's not how things get done. Like the whole plant has to be taken into account when the truth is being told. So Bob, why don't you start that entity that we're talking about that can move forward with, integrity and check. Bro, if you start one, you're looking at your first member right here.
So
We
listen, JJ, you're not the first person that asked. I am proud to say that there's a particular organization that's not necessarily as prominent as it once was. I was very, very, very involved in that organization for a number of years. Won a couple
Mhm.
of leadership awards from that organization now. And some people have said, well, why don't we just use that organization, sort of pump it back up again? And it's the oldest hemp organization out there, and let's go advance this thing. And I think that unfortunately, I'm not so sure we're uh, we're at a point where people are willing to talk to each other, and that really has to be the key. Because and by the way, I know a lot of people in the hemp sector don't necessarily go to the MJ BizCon in Las Vegas, which is happening a week from now or next week. Um, but it is where bridges are built. It is where industry groups come together. It is where the discussion takes place. And I'm really, really curious to see what people are saying because half the industry is rejoicing that hemp compounds have gotten locked up. And I mean half, meaning there's a lot of industrial hemp folks that feel that way. There's the
Mhm.
marijuana sector. You can't root against, if you're in the cannabis industry, which was subject to prohibition for, almost 100 years, you can't root against other sectors of the same industry. You can't advance a prohibitionist policy against something that you're prohibited from doing and saying, "Oh, well, if I can't do it that way, they should be prohibited too." It's just not even, I don't even, JD, I don't even have any hair to pull out, but it makes me want to pull my hair out. It's crazy.
I'll send you some tweezers for Christmas. That'll be your Christmas present. Yeah, man. I think I sincerely think it's crazy. And then too, I'm all about black and white facts. I'm all about documentation. And one of the things that I always point to, is my buddy Dr. Terrell Newton. He wrote this book on the endocannabinoid system. Let me actually unblur my background so that
Yeah, that
it's
that didn't come
uh
through great.
yeah,
There it is.
there we go. That right there, right? Endocannabinoid medicine and pharmacology, written by Dr. Terrell Newton. He wrote a book on the endocannabinoid system. And as you look at some of the case study that's in it, there's over 50 cases, right, that he's studied in this book. And in doing so, what you see, and it's on Amazon, by the way, if anybody's ever interested in it, you can find it on Amazon. What's interesting is in most of his casework and most of the case study that he's put out there, he's showing low doses of THC combined with CBD to get therapeutic relief for a lot of the symptoms. It's not the damn 10, 15, 20% THCs that are getting people, therapeutic relief. So if from a therapeutic relief, if that's not what it's take, then why are we trying to knock everybody's block off with 25, 30% THC right now? There's certainly a place for it. I get it, but this is not what the case studies are currently showing. So I just wish that people would move forward with more, like you said, common sense, trying to play in the sandbox together. And I don't know if it's going to take, somebody just breaking away from, it's like, yeah, you want everybody to come together and sing Kumbaya, but sometimes you got to have faith the size of a mustard seed and say, hey, I'm going north. Anybody who wants to come north with me, come on. But I'm going north. I'm not going northeast. I'm not going northwest. I'm going north, you
And
know.
I don't even think it's kumbaya. I don't even think they have to sing kumbaya. It's just take the damn egos out of the room and realize that what you did before didn't work. It doesn't
Right,
work. So
right,
like you got to do something different. So
right.
don't go back and say, "Well, Mom, just give me that toy back. I just want one toy. I know you took five toys, but I just want one toy back." Why are you asking for the toy that got taken away because you didn't know what you were doing in the first place? You need to
Right.
regroup and check the ego at the door. And it's not kumbaya as much as it's just, let professionals do it. There are too many folks that claim to be professionals or claim to understand cannabis policy that do not. And those are the folks that are making decisions and ultimately the purse strings, spending money on people to lobby for policies that make no sense. Make no
Right.
sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know. But to your point is if folks can just come together and recognize that it's not about their little sector, it's not, and when you start to talk about the plant, it gets a little hokey to some people, right?
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
believe that, the plant, believing in the plant's such a powerful thing that I believe there's some magic in that. But if that
Oh,
doesn't resonate with you or resonate with certain people, you don't have to believe in the magic of the plant. That sounds hokey. But what about the opportunities? What about the fact that, if we use the plant to its full capacity, we'll have houses that don't burn down. We'll have, plastic that doesn't pollute the environment. We'll have fuel that helps with emissions. We'll have all kinds of uses from this plant that was designed to be used the way we're talking about it. And I hate to say, even the resins from the plant are going to be exploited that way. But
yep.
we got to realize that it's just one plant and it's really a supply chain perspective.
Mhm. I always say from housing to healing, you're covered with hemp. And
You
that's
are.
truly the case. But going back to the core, the root. I mean, I was a drill sergeant for 5 years, so I'm all about basic training. I know if somebody has the right basic training, they can go forth and they can be extremely successful. But they got to understand the basics first. And I think we're at a time where there aren't enough. There are a lot of people who understand their own individual sector, right? But not enough people understand the basics of certain things first prior to going out here. And that's a problem. And if there's anybody that I can offer that hemp 101 to get them those basics, I still to this day, man, I think that's the missing key. I think someone who can come in with a very neutral stance, a very neutral way of being, somebody who has a neutral background that everybody can relate to, right? Come in and does some basic education and keep it at that basic level and do it all around the country. Somebody who can give the basic and talk about policy, rules and regulations, talk about cannabinoids, talk about the industrial side, talk about, testing standards, talk about
Mhm.
drug testing, give everybody tips and so no matter what if you're a farmer or a doctor, bro, you can sit in the same room, get the same seminar and leave with the same basic understanding, and now you can go off back to farming or back to the physician world or wherever you're at, and have some, and now start to tailor what you learned, from the basics. I don't think enough people get the basics. That's just my take on it. And having a small wallet myself, right? I wish I could afford to go around and just do that basic education for everybody all the time. But I feel like if enough of that basic education were to take place, a lot of these problems and issues would be self-correcting, because eventually you would have certain senators and certain congressmen that would sneak and sit into the back of those rooms, that would just want that basic education, that basic understanding, and then they can go off and positively affect policy changes,
And
so
isn't this administration uh, America first? I mean, we can grow hemp and we can do all these great things. We're looking for a new economic driver. We're
mhm.
looking for ways to create jobs with an American plant, or at least a plant with deep American history. We're looking at all of this, and this administration is uniquely positioned to receive it. But people need to put it out there and say that this commoditized plant, this plant can do, to your point, it's construction, it's healing, it's everything in between.
Mhm.
That plant can do it. So then where's that voice?
It-
Where's that message?
it's
Instead,
just it's
no, no,
just
no,
that
no.
the
Give me my 10 milligram cap on beverages and you'll never hear from me again. Like, really?
no, that's no,
That's your
that's not
solution.
like, for 21 years, I didn't have that luxury of just thinking about myself, right? I always had to think about the greater good. What does it take to accomplish the mission? That was everybody's focus, is mission accomplishment, right? You keep the force in as good mental and physical spirits as possible to accomplish the mission, not because of their mental spirits or their physical spirit. No, you're in top prime condition so that you can go off and do the mission, and I don't think enough people are there yet. They're more focused on their little individual nut, rather than this whole basket, of what we can do. So, so moving forward, Bob, like what's next for you, man, in terms of trying to, move this ball, continue to move this ball forward?
I'm just watching, man. I'm just watching. I still work with a fair amount of people in the space and their friends, so I'm talking to them. They're looking where they're saying, Bob, help me figure out where I could spend my money in DC. Like, where's good money? Like, if I'm going to spend this much on lobbying or government affairs, where can I spend it? And I don't have an answer for that. So I'm just listening. I'm listening for someone that really can show some leadership. I'm listening for someone that really has a common sense approach on how to create an industry with a plant that can be used and with such versatility. I'm looking for people that want to work together and build bridges, and not people that say, "See, I told you so. This was always going to happen, blah 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 blah
That
blah."
is
Like,
that
doesn't
that shit wastes so much time. Like, dude, we get it, man. You were one of the first ones involved. Got it. You didn't get
got it.
listened to. Got it. You got your ass thrown in jail for what you did. Got it. Guess what? Nobody gives a shit anymore. That's the bottom line. Nobody cares anymore. What do we have to do moving forward? Because in telling all your elaborate stories, all your elaborate people are losing interest, and you're making yourself look bad because you're going on and on and on and on and on about the past more than worried about the future. So I get it, man. I totally understand. And I myself are, looking for those people that want to, advance things as well. One of the things that we have to, address, and we've already gone over an hour, so we're good there. But man, if anyone if they need legitimate consulting and they have resources that they're looking to deploy, how do you want them getting in touch with Bob Hoban to be able to do that, man?
It's easy to find me. Bob at bobhoban.com is my email address. You can go to the bobhoban.com site too. It's got other information on there. You can look me up on LinkedIn. You can just Google me. It's easy to find. I'm not always on time, but I usually respond to everything in at least 48 or 72 hours max. But yeah, reach out. I mean, share your thoughts on some of this stuff too. I hope what you could take away from some of this stuff is I don't have answers, JJ. I don't know what the answer is, but I'm not seeing even a hope of an answer because of the way people are just boxing out and protecting their own interest. And yes, what do you expect in politics? Of course, in politics, everybody protects their interest, but this is not just a political issue. This is an industry, and if
Yeah.
people really care about the opportunity, forget about the plant, forget about, oh yes, let's create a sustainable, environmentally friendly crop. Let's create a new America First product. If you just think about making money, if that's all you care about, then you should still
You're,
be
yeah,
looking for a unified approach because that you're
yeah,
not going to make money in one sector of the industry. You're only going to make money
yeah,
if the plant can be used for as broad of a purpose as possible. And that's a fact because if you can, if for example, all there ends up being is that some sort of beverage carve out, then beverage companies are going to make it. And not even the beverage companies that exist today. If it's
Mhm.
federally authorized expressly, then it's going to be big beverage interests that control that sector, not
Yep,
the 200 different brands that exist today in all the different
yep,
states. Those companies don't mean anything to the big
yep,
CPG interest when it comes down to it. They're going to roll them. Maybe they buy a brand or two, maybe they license a brand, but they're going to get rolled just like the industry got rolled. So it really comes down to folks that have a perspective, or some ideas or some answers. Please reach out to me, reach out to JJ and I, reach out to us.
hell yeah.
The day we're all ears. I just don't see any leadership, and I don't know when leadership's who's going to be the next. I was just in Japan, and on one of there was something called the Torii Gates. It's this place in Kyoto, Japan, and there's like 1,000 of these red gates you walk through, and it was really cool. You walk up the mountain, and it's all in Japanese lettering primarily. But there was one place
Mhm.
I stopped. I didn't see the words until I stopped. It was a really pretty picture, and I stopped, and on the post was who's going to be. This isn't an exact quote, but it was pretty much like, who's going to be the next hero? In other words, who's going to step up? I don't know who that is. I
Yeah,
don't know what
yeah,
vacuum you need for leadership to take place because when shit goes sideways, it usually doesn't bring the right leaders to the space. It usually
yeah.
brings the bad leaders.
I agree.
And that's unfortunately what I'm seeing right now. And we deserve better. We are better. And only time will tell.
And one of the things I learned, it's funny that you mentioned, this absence of leadership. There have been many times in my career where I had bad leaders. I had people that couldn't cut the mustard, but they were in charge or they were leaving. And one of the things that I learned about leadership is in the absence of leadership, you become leadership. You don't let your people down just because the person in charge of you is a clown. You figure out a way to step it up yourself, and eventually you become what the people need. And I think those people that are out there, because I know that they exist. I know the people who come out here on these Zooms when I host them, on a continual basis. I always see, people like Drew Kitt. I don't see my buddy Theo Alexander out here tonight, but I just see a lot of people that are always out here, when we do these things. And those are the people that are coming leaders behind the scenes. But guess what, man? For some people, it's time for you to step out of the shadows and step in your own light. You know, um, to continue to down that path of leadership. It's funny. Last thing I got before we get off here, man. Like, it's no secret I own a CBD brand, THC free or whatnot. But like people always come at me crazy all the time. And I just laugh, right? Because they're like, well, JJ, well, some people want THC. Not everybody is all about not having THC. And I've got extra CBG, but it's like, hold on, pump the brakes for a second. Do you realize that I partially own a medical marijuana grow too? So don't give me shit about being all THC free all the time. Like I own part of a medical marijuana grow myself, So I truly want to see everything, come together and rise up together. But like you said, that leadership, has to be there. And yeah, it's scary to think of where it's going to come from next. But all I know for sure, Bob, is if I ever look up and see you doing anything, bro, you gotta look, as long as the membership fee isn't too high and I don't have to sell a kidney to get in. I mean, I'm almost in stripper shape, right? So I can probably come up with some money pretty fast, but I always want to be part of what you're doing, man, because you're a phenomenal person, number one. Number two, you are an industry leader and you are someone worthy, of following, on the battlefield, bro. So you always got my back no matter what, man. I appreciate you taking the time to come out here and have this chat. Who knows who's going to see it, moving forward when I post this recording out there. But dude, you are greatly appreciated. Your efforts were not in vain, and you've always got to support it here, man. For real.
I appreciate you as always, JJ. Keep spreading the good word, and like I said, let's do some more of this stuff together, and um,
Yeah, man.
maybe like you said, maybe the absence of leadership is what's going to draw the next generation out. And that's part of it too. That's part of it too, is how many times can guys like us step up and try to be the steady voice? The next generation has to step up, and I'm not seeing it.
I
Somebody's got
agree.
to step up.
Hey man, that's cool. But I'll tell anybody this who here, like if you ever see me doing anything anywhere as a leader and you haven't done anything, keep your ass out of my way. You weren't doing it. I'm doing it now. It's either lead, follow, or get out of the way. Like you weren't doing it. If we're doing it, hey man, let us do it. Appreciate your support, but you had nothing to say when we were out there, with this little bitty shovel trying to dig this big hole by ourselves, right? So we got the hole dug. We're moving forward. We're trying to do it. So who knows? Who knows? But I know I'm gonna continue to move forward in good spirits, brother. I will see you in Colorado next year, no matter what they call the freaking event. I'm gonna be there. And we got some more silly times ahead.
Sounds good, man. I look forward to it. Appreciate you, and thanks for joining us, everybody. And excited to,
Absolutely.
believe it or not, excited to keep talking about this because it's not all doom and gloom, but there's some
No.
things that need to shake up.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Bob, I appreciate your time, man, and let's stay in touch in the near future. Figure out, what's next, where we're gonna go from here. Whatever you want to do, man, I'm down. Just let me know.
Likewise, man. Thank you.
All right, brother. Well, y'all have a good night. Y'all take
You
care.
too.
Okay,
Bye.
then. All right, bye bye.